Yes, sir. Good to see you. David, I might put you up here on this panel if I'm all right.
You take my one. Are we rolling?
You'll chime in for me anyway. Let's see, we're live. All right, folks, welcome to the Mitchell County Subdivision Proposed Changes Public Workshop. And we're going to be talking today about the proposed changes related to the Mitchell County Subdivision Ordinance. So the ordinance had been looked at over the last couple months, and we took the changes that were proposed by folks in the community and put them into a document. Now, this document with these proposed changes does not necessarily mean these proposed changes will go into effect. We're going to talk about them, and then the commission board will study the data. They'll get consultation, and then they'll make a decision as to if there are proposed changes that are needed. They'll then go into effect, where we'll have next step will be a public hearing, followed by an adoption of a revised subdivision ordinance. So as we go over these proposed changes, realize that this draft is not a draft of proposed changes that will go through if nothing else happens. These are ones we're talking about. We're getting your input on. So to introduce myself, I'm Alan Cook. I'm the Mitchell County Manager. And what I'm doing is been tasked by the commission board to bring in a forum style public workshop where we can get experts to speak to certain areas of this subdivision ordinance. With that said, I want to go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves. And I also want to let folks know these folks don't necessarily have a pro or cons. They're here to give their expert opinion of what they see as they work with that subdivision ordinance or what they've seen through their industry, and they're speaking to their subject matter expertise. In fact, I don't know where any of these folks stand on this issue, and I like it that way. So I want folks to know on the live stream that we just picked us a forum out right here of folks that seem to have a solid subject matter expertise. So I'm going to start over here with Stephanie Johnson. So if you speak into the microphone, introduce yourself, talk about your background a little bit.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Johnson. I am a realtor at Mountain Adventure Realty. I specialize in land and home sales in Mitchell County. I've been in this area for about 12 years and in the real estate industry 9 years. Before real estate, my background actually was commercial construction. So a lot of land development, grading, commercial buildings, things of that matter. So I do have a wide range of knowledge in not just how to sell a home, but how to build it or access it, things like that. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate this forum here for being here. Mason.
My name is Mason Gardner. I've worked for the state for over 21 years. Most of that is with the local health department. I'm currently the interim health director for Toe River Health District. In my time with the health department, I've worked in environmental health with septics and restaurant inspections. I've also developed 2 subdivisions a long time ago. But that's it.
That's awesome. Thank you. Tommy.
I'm Tommy Winchester. I'm the Director of Inspections for Mitchell County. Been with Mitchell County over 8 years as inspections. Prior to that, I was a licensed general contractor, licensed electrician, licensed plumber. Did a lot of residential work.
Thank you, Tommy. Keegan.
Keegan Silver, Mitchell County GIS coordinator. I've been here since September of 2011. Before that, I was in surveying. I've got a private surveying license. Born and raised here.
Thank you, Keegan. Eric.
Eric Wiseman, representing fire service in Mitchell County. I've got 35 plus years fire service here in the county. Formerly years ago, kind of where Tommy is, I was emergency management director here and also did fire inspections for 10 years in Mitchell County.
All right. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate you being here. So, folks, we're going to start going over this subdivision ordinance, and the red areas are the proposed changes. For those on live stream, you can download this link to get to this document off of the Mitchell County website. That's mitchellcountync.gov is the URL to get there. And if you go to news, I think you'll see subdivision ordinance. So if you need help with that, let me know. You can call or email me here at the county. So everything in red has been proposed to be changed on the subdivision ordinance, but I do want to read everyone the resolution to amend the subdivision ordinance for the county of Mitchell, because the wording in this basically is stated that we do respect property owner rights. That is something we hold highly, but we also want to have a roadmap for an outside developer who maybe is not familiar with building in the mountains to be able to make a development that is going to sell, number one. Number two, it's going to be something that don't impact negatively the neighbors. Number three, that if it does go bankrupt or something, that it's sellable property at the end of the day, so it can be used again in the future. And probably one of the most important reasons for this subdivision ordinance is that we can have emergency response personnel, specifically 40-foot long fire trucks, getting up there to help folks out if they're in need. And that's not just for a current development, but when that's sold down the chain 2 or 3 families later, that house has a means of people getting up there to help out and stop fires. And that is really one of the main reasons is public safety. So whereas the county of Mitchell is a political subdivision of the state of North Carolina and a public body established under the laws of the state of North Carolina for the representation of its citizens and residents, and whereas General Statute 160D 801 authorizes local governments to regulate the subdivision of land within its jurisdiction. Whereas prior to the enactment of the subdivision ordinance for Mitchell County, large-scale subdivisions such as the Village of Penland created lots which are inaccessible to unsuspecting purchasers, could not reasonably support a well or septic system, and were not sustainable as a productive use of land. And whereas North Carolina Fire Code requires that a subdivision road have a minimum of 20-foot wide travel surface, which does not include ditches, culverts, and slope cuts for safe access by fire trucks. Whereas the North Carolina Fire Code recommends that the travel surface be capable of supporting a imposed load of fire apparatus weighing at least 75,000 pounds. And whereas the Mitchell County Commission is mindful of respecting individual property rights, family divisions of land, and recombinations of land while providing for public health, safety, and welfare of those purchasing such lots. And whereas the minimum lot standards set forth in this ordinance are designed to facilitate compliance with the state requirements imposed upon Toe River Health Department for setbacks of water from septic systems, leach field requirements, and repair areas requirements. And whereas having a minimum lot standards will minimize unsuspecting purchasers from being stuck with unusable property. And whereas the division of land into parcels greater than 10 acres where no street right-of-way dedication is involved is exempt from regulation under this ordinance. And whereas the division of land for certain smaller acreage tracts is exempt from regulation under this ordinance. Whereas the division of land in accordance with the terms of a probated will or an inheritance is exempt from the regulation of this ordinance. Whereas the Mitchell County Commission seeks to balance the interests of those wishing to subdivide land with those of the prospective purchasers and needs of emergency responders. Therefore, the County of Mitchell hereby adopts the following amended subdivision ordinance. So a lot of whereas is right in there, but they basically are set up to where we know the mindset going into this. And this is a very light subdivision ordinance if you compare it to others in the state. And we made it that way for a reason. So I'm going to go through here now. And I know we got a couple folks out here. And if you have a question, I'll have you chime in. You can come up on the microphone or I'll hand you the microphone and you can ask a question to this panel and see what, their opinions are. I'd like for you to introduce yourself if you do, but I'm going to start going through some of the areas where there were potential changes. If I'm not covering an area, it's because it didn't have red ink on there showing that it had been changed, and no citizens had come forth and asked for the change. So I was going where citizens had asked for some rewording. So this would be Article 4, Section 5, Review Board. And it was added to the end of that: in the event that a municipality wishes to adopt this ordinance within their planning and zoning jurisdiction, the review board will have representation from that town. So there's been a lot of questions about the review board. And for this subdivision ordinance, I brought the review board to this workshop. And Tommy Winchester, our building inspector, and Keegan Silver's our mapping person, is the review board, the initial review board. And then there's a technical review committee that will meet of it towards the end of this ordinance we'll talk about, but they're the initial folks that you submit an application for. There were some discussion points that they might want a bigger board, but that bigger board would cause the meeting and the process to go much slower. If someone's done their homework and they got it done quick, then running it through two folks at building inspections is going to make that application and those plats move a lot quicker. So that was some of the discussion point on this about a municipality wishing to adopt this ordinance within their planning and zoning jurisdiction. That will be their decision. So if Spruce Pine or Bakersfield wants to adopt this ordinance, that's up to them. Their planning jurisdiction is within their town limits. So we wanted to make sure that wording was clarified. Does anybody on the review board have anything to chime in on that? I kind of think that's a standard. So here's one that was brought forth. So subdivision defined, Article 5, Section 1. For the purposes of this ordinance, a subdivision shall mean any division of real estate into, it was 6. Folks are asking for 8 or more lots or parcels for the purpose of sale or building development, whether immediate or future, and shall include any further division of any parcel previously divided. So the wording went from 6 to 8 before the subdivision kicked in. Anybody want to comment on going from 6 to 8 before the subdivision ordinance comes in? I want to specifically ask a question. To what point is public safety? How many lots does it take to where we feel the need? Because right now, if you move that up to 8 lots instead of 6, is that something that you want the road requirements for a subdivision to get a fire truck in? I'm at what point is, somebody's, I like to say, do you respect a landowner who wants to do a small subdivision? But then at what point do you want to require that road to be wide enough and within the subdivision ordinance? So that's something to think on. I don't know necessarily if anybody wants to speak to it, but.
I personally like the idea of 8. I think once we hit 10, you're really getting into, there's going to be a lot of traffic on it. You figure 2 to 3 cars on that road on a regular basis, if there's houses on each one. So I was okay with 6. I'm okay with 8. I feel like if we hit 10, you got a lot of action on that road and a lot of future development.
So you're kind of at your mindset is once you hit 10, then that's definitely you're needing to get fire truck access going in there, and you need to have that wide enough. All right. Appreciate that realtor's perspective on that. And I had a discussion point down here for fire truck accessible roads. How many total lots should there be before lots are subject to the subdivision road requirements? So I think we've addressed that. Anybody else want to chime in on that? Okay. It's anybody out here? Go ahead. Introduce yourself. Here you go.
I'm David Weatherman. Appreciate you guys doing this. First of all, I'm a general manager of Waterfront Group, and we recently purchased Grassy Creek Golf Course, as some of you probably are, or maybe all of you know. I won't get into all that or my background right now, but definitely appreciate you guys doing this. But to tag on to that, I'm dealing with adjacent, well, it's kind of adjacent county right now. In this topic, and I agree with what you're saying. Maybe more from I'll take more from a planning perspective, even than a developer perspective, but it does make sense. I think they allow up to 10 lots, minor subdivision, staff approval only. But they still require their minimum road standards to be met, which is very similar to what the proposals are and what's in this ordinance, 20-foot minimum road, 40 or 45-foot right of way. So I definitely think from a development standpoint as well, that's a great idea to have those minimum standards, especially as it relates to traffic and emergency vehicle access. So just wanted to add that.
Yes, anytime you want to add, I was trying to get this gentleman to come up, sit on the panel seat. We had one chair open. Anybody else got anything you want to add at this point? Now, anytime you let me know.
I'll say,
Introduce yourself, please.
my name is Carl Jenny. My wife and I own property on Leatherwood Lane over by Big Lynn Lodge off of Lingate. I was worried about what all was going to be included, and so far I'm hearing things that are extremely reasonable. I come from New Jersey where everything is covered, so I was afraid that we were going to become more and more like New Jersey, and I'm not seeing that feeling here. This is feeling really good.
Well, thank you. And I think sometimes folks will equate zoning and subdivision ordinances very similar, and they're not. And we are not in this is not a zoning document. So we definitely want to make sure we're not running the New Jersey route. Not that the folks in New Jersey are good folks, but sometimes their setup, yes. Sometimes their setup might not be the same as Mitchell County. So we're good with that. Okay, so we're going to move on down through here. And the next thing is Article 5, Section 2. Now, this was one that had a lot of discussion, and someone had brought forth that they would like to see the division of land into parcels all greater than 3 acres if no street right of way is involved. So these are exceptions. So let me get this context right. So exceptions for the subdivision ordinance. So if the following apply to your property, it's an exception and you're not under the subdivision ordinance. The way it was originally, if you were setting up lots greater than 5 acres, 5.01 acres, and that's all you did was 5 acre lots, well, that would not fall under the subdivision ordinance. So you could put, if you had the property, you could put 45 acre lots, 5.1 acre lots, and you could build roads and do whatever you wanted without any kind of governmental document here, without any ordinance in to have to deal with. So one person said that they'd like to bring it down to 3 acre lots instead of 5 acres. But now there's a question there. If you did 3 acres, then how many lots does it take before you want to get to fire? You know, we said the 8, we said 10. So if you were to give the 3 acre option and someone took and made 23 acre lots along a ridge, those are people living there and there's fire access needed. So what does this board think about that? I would like to hear some perspective from any of you, maybe county mapping, building inspectors, fire. I think there's some input to be had up here. So moving it from 5 acres to 3 acres, you don't have to say disagree or agree, but I would like to hear some of what you think would be needing to be weighed out if he's making a decision about that.
Well, as your total number of lots go up, your fire load increases.
Mhm.
That's what we're trying to help remedy, to be able to get fire apparatuses, emergency
Mhm.
personnel to the site. So there would still, even at 3 acres, you would still need, I'm gonna say the same number, 8 to 10, because
Mhm.
you've got a bigger area, but you've still got the same fire load.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the balance is you're gonna have that many houses potentially at some point. So that load, whether it's 5 acres or 3 acres, in the grand scheme of things, is not gonna make any difference, because once you hit that number,
Mhm.
you've got that issue of loading of those roads, travel, all that good stuff. So
Yeah,
I agree
I could
with
see
Tom
that.
on
That makes good sense.
Yeah.
I think that when we're looking at revising this subdivision ordinance, there might be a discussion point of, we're going to do 8, we're going to do 10, and then after that, it goes to the state subdivision ordinance, the lines to which you can run, which many times is very much more strict than what we got right here. The lines which you can run on that says 10 acres, and we gave it 5 acres. So, we want to look at maybe total home sites or buildings on that need fire service might be a way to check that out. Thank you for coming, sir. I can get you a copy of the subdivision ordinance if you'd like that as well. Okay. So anyways, that was one of the discussion points. And anybody else got any input of whether you go from 5 to 3?
My thing's the topography. It's mountain lands, whether it's 3 or 5, 3-acre lot's a pretty good sized lot, but sometimes you can't get it
Side
all.
of a hill.
You can't get 3 acres to perk sometimes.
Yep.
It's gotta be usable acres.
It's gotta
Yeah.
be. useful. I agree with them as well. I like the idea of 5 acres, but it's the same. I mean, so you may have 5 acres and literally one flat home site that will fit one car in it, so, I'm okay with 5 or 3.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll keep moving on down through here. So I'm just going over proposed discussion points from citizens. One, our attorney did put in here on exceptions. So the original wording on an exception was if you had a family member where the relationship is to the extent of a parent and child, grandparent, grandchild, brother, sister, and those that go around that type of kinship, you have no requirement to be on that there. You're accepted from the subdivision ordinance. It does not apply to you. For example, if I got one daughter, but let's say for some reason late in life, we had about 5 more kids and I subdivided the family property, say I had 100 acres and I subdivided it into 1 acre tracts and split it out between all those kids. And I had roads steep as could be all through it. That's not under subdivision ordinance because it's within the family. If it stays within the family. And in fact, there was an old wording that we marked out. As soon as the property is sold for profit or given to someone else outside the family, all subdivision rules apply. Our attorney marked that out. So family protection is complete, inclusive. We're not getting into how you deal with your family in there, and that come from our attorney. So that one will be an exception that we're going to probably hold on to that one. So we also added, if you go to exceptions to the subdivision ordinance section 2, we add the division of the division of a tract into parcels in accordance with the terms of a probated will in accordance with intestate succession under chapter 29. So E, F, G, and H were things that our attorney added to this subdivision ordinance that makes it lighter. It gives it more exception for folks that, where it doesn't apply. So for example, on this one, if you had a will and a division of land, that's going to fall outside of it because it was required by a will to be divided. The public acquisition by purchase of strips of land for the widening or opening of streets, that's kind of like the government jumping in there and grabbing it, or street widening, DOT, whatever. The division of land into single ownership whose entire acreage area is no greater than 2 acres, but not more than 3 lots, where no street right-of-way dedication is involved, where the resultant lots are equal to or exceed the standards of the local government as shown in its subdivision regulations. And the other one is the boundary line agreement between 2 adjoining property owners where the tract to be conveyed is recombined with an adjoining tract. And we had a gentleman ask for that one, and that is now shown in the exceptions, and our attorney did clear that wording. So that's a little bit about these exceptions. A lot of those were legal, but if anybody wants to chime in on that, feel free to do so. All right, we're covering on down. So next one, Mason, you see Article 6 right down here. Subdivision, water and sewer systems. Now, our attorney is 4 Eggers, and he kind of aggravates me, and he said, you took the lightest subdivision ordinance in the state and you lightened it up even more, is what you're looking to do. And I was like, well, our citizens want us to look at it and make sure we're not moving in on their rights. And we want to make sure that we're keeping people safe too with public safety. Well, subdivision, water and sewer systems. The discussion point on this, I marked it all out. And that's not because we don't want that subdivision to be guided by all this wording, but we feel that you, with the health department, Mason, are going to be doing that all anyways with the regulations and the laws you have set. We will probably add wording about bonding and backing up if you're making guarantees about a septic system into that. So it says we may be able to delete most of this section. New wording could be added by an attorney as long as the size standards are appropriate for the lot to support water and sewer. It is typically done by the purchaser later. I would want a developer to post a bond and complete the street and stormwater improvements, but lots may have their own water and septic system, however that be approved through, whether it's town water and sewer, whether it's your folks through environmental health come out and make sure the regulations. In fact, they cannot build unless they go through that process. So it's not that we were marking this out because it wasn't a priority. It's redundant in many ways to what's going on with another agency that covers that. So that's kind of what we were specking out, but there could be some wording come that would make that maybe instead of about 1.5 pages or 2 pages, maybe 1 paragraph, just to kind of let folks know what to do. Anybody got any input on that from the panel here? Anybody out here got any input on the water systems? All right,
The only
folks.
thing I would like to
Go
say
ahead.
real quick is about springs.
Yes.
We see a ton of springs here in old
Mhm.
construction and new construction. And so if you do add something that covers that, maybe consider a spring as well, because it's not normal to see it in other areas, but here we have a ton of natural.
We do have
springs.
good water and springs. Mason, could you speak to springs and what that would be just regularly required outside of a subdivision? And then in the focus of saying multifamilies, because I think you can use a spring if you turn it into a water system, isn't it? Kind of like a water supply system or.
You can use a spring for your single family residence, and other applications. You could not use it for food establishments.
Okay.
We don't regulate springs. We have building requirements, construction standards for wells, but we have none with the state or district for springs. So we do get a lot of spring questions, and our typical response is you can use that as a drinking source if you wish. But we don't have any construction standards that we can say, yes, we're approving this or denying it. We don't have any standards to meet that.
So if we were to take this wording out and leave it to the health department to make that judgment call as to how that house is supplied with water, then that would be kind of where the springs would go. It'd be under the purview of the health department as to how that water goes. Would that, he's like, I don't know, don't put this on me now.
We see multiple houses on one spring. I see it.
Yeah.
I've sold a lot like that.
Yeah, and we don't.
The mortgage folks don't like them, but
We have some restrictions with the state through public water supply.
Mhm.
Once you get past, was it 15 connections, you become public water supply. Or if you have, I can't remember some of the flow charts on that. But the spring wouldn't be a valid form of water at that point anyway.
Yeah, so you're kind of saying that, yeah, let's say here's a picture of how this would look. You got a subdivision up on a ridge and the developer has a really good spring up there. And so this spring's off-site, and then maybe that's those pieces of property, those 1 acre lots have water rights to the spring. maybe the developer has got the liability on them for keeping that water clean. Because if those people are poisoned off that spring, is there something regulatory that goes to that, or do the water rights for each person run individual? See, I'm thinking if the developer holds those water rights, then the developer should have a safety standard in place. And if we're not addressing it, it needs to be addressed. I'm not against springs, but I do want to say the public safety aspect.
Yeah, I would always ask James Emery from Asheville.
Okay,
You wouldn't want to spring on a whole neighborhood.
Right.
It
Yeah,
would just be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well-
think I would be very leery to supply a subdivision with spring. That's just my.
yeah,
personal-
that's what I'm thinking. A lot of developers are probably going to be saying, I don't know if I want that liability.
We just see it. I just told one that had 3 houses on the spring and it's a spring box and each one has their,
Yeah,
that's.
yeah, and I mean that I was raised on a spring,
Yeah.
and
Still got one.
I see where it works, but to say, would I have a rental now? I have a person that's renting and they are on a spring, and I'll be honest with you, we got a well. And this was a long time ago, folks, just so you know, before I tell you the story. The spring had frozen in the winter and some of the reservoir, the concrete had chipped off, so it had a little hole about 8-inch, 10-inch diameter. And we went up there to check the water because they said they was having water problems. And there was a darn possum floating in it, crawled in there and drowned, and it was floating. And now think about that renter, had they got E. coli and their child died, and you was responsible for keeping that spring, clean, you could have some liability there. So maybe it's a best practice. We'll leave it up to the health department. What do you think, Eric?
I don't know that I have a thought more than a question. With there being no regulations from the state level on springs, does the county want to get into becoming a regulatory
That's right.
authority trying to regulate springs? Because that's going to open up another.
I agree. And I think that's where our attorney ran with this one. That's why he deleted this section. So,
And I have seen every spring that has ever been tested, because most lenders do require the testing of the water, even VA loan, FHA loan. Every spring I've ever had tested, which is well into hundreds, they've all failed. E. coli, and they're never gonna
I've
pass.
seen one pass.
Oh, okay.
I have seen some pass, it is the
It
rarity.
is very rare.
But we have had some come back that are negative for total, negative. for
They
total.
probably shocked it before you got
It's-
there.
But, most of the time you're correct. Most of the time they're gonna be present for total, and it's gonna be negative for fecal, hopefully. But that's, if I was a bet man, I would bet it's gonna come up positive for total.
okay. So if I think that if we say that it's on the developer, and it said on here, the developer to post a bond and complete street and stormwater improvement, but lots may have their own water and septic system. That is kind of where our attorney's looking to want to add that wording down that effect. Anybody thinking on that? Is that might leave that open to where that spring question.
Fine, unless there's a community water system.
Yes, I agree with that.
Then there's
Once it
other
becomes
requirements.
community, make it well or something that's
Yes.
looked at.
Okay.
That's what I would do.
Maybe we add a little bit of wording on a community water system, but we don't go after specifically springs, but
Cause community wells,
It's gotta be.
there's a certain number
Yeah.
that can use one without having to do all the.
Yeah.
Did you say that number was 15? Is that
Don't
kind of
quote
a
me.
measure?
I want to say
Somewhere-
15 connections, and then it depends on. Is it 25 people? It'll do a frequency, how frequently do they come and go? Is it less than or greater than 6 months out of the year? Becomes transient or non-community. I would talk to James Emery.
Okay.
I'm glad to talk to James Emery and talk to you.
okay, that'd be good.
But yeah, I would do something. I mean, even if I was a developer, I wouldn't want to supply spring, I'm not,
You'd be feeling the liability.
yeah, I just wouldn't want to do that.
In addition to being from New Jersey and having property here for 20 years, I'm a civil engineer with almost 50 years experience. And my concern, so this is all up my alley. My only concern with being light on the wording is that you don't want to leave the impression if a subdivision is approved that there aren't water guarantees and there aren't septic guarantees. So whatever legal wording comes out in here, it's got to be clear that they're buying a lot with unknown ability for water and septic. So it's clear, because if you're doing all of this because you're worried about people subdividing and then unloading property on unsuspecting people, that is the biggest thing that somebody can have is unsuspecting, not being able to perk and get water. So whatever legal wording goes in here, I
I
think.
will take that down. We're gonna review this live stream, but now I want to say this. Having a panel here of these experts, and then I got me a civil engineer in here, and I got me a developer, and I bet this gentleman here knows some stuff that he can tell us. Yeah, he's been around a little bit, so you chime in, and I'm glad to have you here. So you chime in. You are, Jerry, I had you up here on the panel now. You get on up here, brother. Oh, we got a seat for you up there now. I appreciate you being here, Jerry. I knowed your, I said, man, I thought that looked familiar there.
I look like the working part of the batch.
So we've got a real good group here. Jerry, introduce yourself just so folks will know who you are.
Eric here and
Keegan.
Keegan. Know this fella over here, Madison, don't know her.
I'm Stephanie.
Stephanie, good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Jerry does a lot of great work around here, done it for many, many years and worked in building out developments.
Some
He's-
good roads, some bad.
He's done a little bit of everything on that. He's been working in it. So you feel free to chime in now. I think we got your microphone right there. Okay, we good now. Yes, sir.
I think most of the time, and obviously this is for all developers, but some are maybe better than others, but for any credible developer, I would say they're already gonna build that stuff in as well. Because the last thing we would want to do is it be, running into issues with lots sold. So we build it into our contracts that it's a guarantee. And we do that through soils testing and things like that on the front end, but we don't want to buy lots back. But we will if something were to happen and they didn't have water and sewer. So I think I would like to think that most developers put that in so they're not dealing with those issues. They pretty much know before they go into it if it's, if they're gonna have any soils issues or water issues or anything like that, but so hopefully that would be the case. It's something you'd be looking at, or maybe questions that would be asked to a developer. If you're talking to them on submittals, if they have anything like that, because that's gonna cover it as well.
That's awesome. That's a good perspective. That is, when somebody's going in there and they're doing that development, it's waterfront group, that's textbook right there. That's giving you assurances.
We definitely don't see that often enough. So thank you. I mean, it's pretty normal for us to come across lots that don't perk or have water. As a realtor, we end up listing those a lot. I was just sharing with him, I showed a property and and the guy says, look, Steph, there's graves. I'm like, these are not graves. This property didn't perk.
Yeah.
You see 8 of them, it didn't perk, so we do see that a lot.
Well, and I'll say this, some folks will use that mentality, buyer beware,
Mhm.
but we don't want somebody to spend their hard-earned money in their hopes. And then they get up here because they just don't know the area and maybe they were too trusting and they didn't do their due diligence. And they're out some money at the end of the day. So I think that's just ethics 101 on that. All right, we're gonna keep moving. I'm getting some good input. Thank y'all. Appreciate this. This is given, and like I said, our commission board will be reviewing this. They've tasked me to do this public workshop and they'll be reviewing this live stream. And that's gonna help them make decisions. All right, requirements for subdivision access roads, section 2. And Jerry, buddy, we're gonna be talking about roads in here. So we had some wording in here, and we had some folks that had some questions about, the roads coming into the development and the access road specifically. So now think of the access road as the road coming across somebody else's property that you have right of way to get to, but you don't control it as the development. So I'll read this. Existing access roads in which developed property has a subservient or a deed specified right of way on an existing road located on other property that accesses the development. So that's what this pertains to. What I just said, somebody else's property, you're coming across it to get to your development, you got a load of vehicles coming onto that development. In the case that a proposed development property has an existing access road across adjoining property or properties with legal easement in accordance with E4 of this section, then the review board shall grant use of existing access roads under the following conditions. The installation of or verification of erosion control measures in accordance with Article 10, Section 3 of this ordinance. And that's basically specifying out what kind of culverts you want, what drainage and all that. So I can go to that and specify it. The installation or verification of at least 4 inches of gravel on the access road. Now, a lot of them may be gravelled, but it might be if you're running your subdivision out of that road right there, you might need to put a little more gravel on because you're taking that road's travel up. Attestation by a North Carolina licensed civil engineer stating that the access road accommodates ingress and regress for fire response vehicles not less than 40 feet, or a letter from the Mitchell County Fire Chief for the district in which the proposed development is to be located, and the Mitchell County Building Inspector attesting that the existing access road can accommodate ingress and egress for a fire response vehicle not less than 40 feet. So let's talk about this a little bit because that's a lot of words. So before on this subdivision ordinance, it kind of had some specifics of grade requirements. I think it said you get up to, what is it, 15% grade. If you go from up to 20, you can get a variance, but you have to pave it if it's above 15 and that 15 to 20. On this, and it'll be showing a little later on roads, but on an access road, they want to make that access road to where a 40-foot fire truck can get up it. Now, when you're building, there's going to be a lot of building supply trucks that are 40 foot long. Jerry, what do you think about 40 foot being a measuring stick for access?
That's pretty long, to
Okay,
be honest with you.
Okay.
For around here.
Yeah.
I think anything a well driller is normally about the biggest truck. I don't know what the length of it is, but it wouldn't be nowhere close to 40, would it?
80% of our fire trucks are 36 to 40 foot.
I'm gonna say low to mid thirties, yeah, somewhere in there, but
Ladder trucks are a little longer.
ladder trucks are the anomaly, but yeah, they're gonna be longer just because, for the most part, there is some shorter ones, but for the most part, they are longer. It's I'm really mulling that over right now.
that's something to think of. 'Cause I think the
It is.
commissioners are going to be really interested in what y'all think about that size on the vehicles coming up, and
Yeah, I'm
civil engineers' perspective too might be needed.
Everybody can get
Yeah.
wheelbase, every truck you got.
well, is it
Every
wheelbase or is it?
Well.
Total
and
length.
that's another thing.
Total
The wheelbase is what counts. The total length
Exactly.
can stick over and it don't really matter. You know what I
As
mean?
long as the grades are certain.
Right, the
percent.
grade's the big
Yes,
issue,
yeah.
but
Mhm.
the wheelbase is what, and like I said,
long as
usually a well truck is the biggest thing that you ever need to get in.
I guess, and I think Tommy's kind of going down the same road I'm going down. What does the 40 feet length of a truck really mean?
We
And
might have to
Are you gonna
specify.
turn around? That's
specify.
what it means. When I had an excursion is, can I turn around in this spot?
it
The turnaround is a bigger issue,
much bigger.
and I did build one through the ordinance through Burnsville.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the turnaround was our big issue. Trying to say you could take a fire truck, the biggest one in the county, and make a circle is almost impossible.
We have a T.
Okay, I was gonna say,
We have-
that's almost
Sorry.
impossible to do that.
Just a quick question on that.
Let me get you on the microphone since we're live streaming.
Thank you. Just a quick question on that, because we run into that often and deal with a few other counties and municipalities that have that in play. It's probably right here in front of me. I was just looking. You mentioned I don't know if there's a requirement now that has any turnaround requirements.
Yes, there is here.
Okay,
It's a little bit later.
okay.
We should get
And
to
I'm
it.
sorry, I tried to read through most of it before I got here.
Mhm. It'll take me a minute to find it, but it is.
Most of what, I'm asking because most of what we deal with, is usually pretty uniform. It's usually not to exceed, you typically can't have more than 1,000 feet, let's say, without installing a specific size turnaround. I've seen it anywhere 800 feet, 1,000 feet, 1,200 feet, different areas. But the reason I bring that up is it seems like everywhere we go, there's some discrepancy on how that's, or some just too much discretion, I think, on how that's viewed. We pretty much say if the ordinance said 1,000 feet, what that means is wherever that turnaround is located, it would be within 500 feet of that either way. Because you're also going to run into either a cul-de-sac or an intersection or something of that nature. So a lot of times we got into situations where we might have, 1,000 feet or 1,100 feet or something like that. And they say, well, you got to have a turnaround in there, but I guess location is the main thing on that, but it makes sense for fire apparatus or emergency services. But I think there's been some issues with how that measurement, and it may be in here, maybe already in here spelled out, but we run into that several times and there always seems to be some question on how that's measured. If you ever have a turnaround within 1,000 feet, is that also including an intersection, which is a turnaround? I'm assuming it would.
Yeah. And I don't think we have
We've not put a footage.
we don't put our footage.
Okay, all right.
But we do have standards for cul-de-sacs, and if you cannot get a cul-de-sac in, you can get it. There's a standard for a T in the place of a.
In lieu of a cul-de-sac. Okay.
Yes.
Just when we get to that, I do have a question. I'm sorry to have these. I wrote some stuff down, but
Top of page 6 on E, that's what it's talking about the T design.
Yeah, and then
And then you found it on
page 9. has,
They got.
I didn't mean to get it.
Page 9. H.
okay, I'm on the one I
Yeah,
printed
because
off.
this kind of opens up a lot of what we want to talk about with the roads and footage and stuff like that, where we need your expertise in this room. Because that'll help us draft that correctly.
Oh, okay. Got you here. I'll wait till
Subdivision.
we get to that stage. I have a cul-de-sac question, so I'll wait till we get to it. Thank you for answering that.
Thank you, David. All right, civil engineer want to chime in on anything right here? Not yet. Okay, we're waiting. All right. Anybody else want to chime in? Because we're going to be talking a lot about roads right now. All right. Let me get back here to where I was. Then shift pages. All right. So we were talking about if we get the road fire access specified out the way y'all kind of see fit, what looks like it works best. Having the access roads only go up to the accommodation of the fire truck and having a fire chief for that district, the building inspector attests that the road is that the access road, the right of way road will accommodate a fire vehicle as a bare minimum. So that way you're not having to go on somebody else's property and do too much. I mean, you'll have some standards, but it wouldn't have the full subdivision standards for that access road. Only the fire load standards is kind of what I'm getting at in that section. I'm getting some head nods on that. Now I want Jerry to chime in. He's built a lot of roads. And I know when you're trying to deal with a right of way issue, you got other parties involved. So that can be a go, no go if you're thinking about a development, if the right of way is not right. And I know we had another wording in here: prior to a developer conveying any lots, all subdivision roads shall be completed in accordance with this ordinance. If a developer wishes to sell lots prior to the completion of all road infrastructure, the developer shall post a performance bond. So that was another thing about requirement for the access roads. There was something up here. in that. I was just double checking to make sure we had some wording on that. Okay, this is one on the next page, 7. That was the word I'm looking for. With respect to existing and proposed private access roads located on adjacent properties, the developer shall provide in the application documentation that legal easements are in place that allow for the increase in the burden of servitude due to the proposed development. So this would require that developer to show that the right of ways and the legal term being the burden of servitude is being met. Otherwise, that's a future lawsuit. So we're getting that covered in that wording. So let's move on. We're going to talk a lot about roads here. All right, we're going to grade. That's page 8, or if you went to section 3 of Article 7. And I got grades. So we had it at maximum grade for any road shall not exceed 15%, except on hilly terrains. The developer may apply to the technical review committee for a grade variance, and grade variances may be granted which allow maximum grades up to 20% for a distance not in excess of 200 feet. The maximum grade within 100 feet of any intersection shall not exceed 10%. Roads with a grade over 15% shall be paved. So here's the proposed change. The above grade requirements will not apply in the event that the developer submits a road plan to the review board that is designed to industry standards and stamped by a professional civil engineer currently licensed to practice in North Carolina, and the approved plan allows for sufficient access, ingress and egress of the property of properly sized fire vehicles. For the purpose of this ordinance, a properly sized fire response vehicle will be no less than 40 feet in length. So this is one that I need y'all, the commission board needs y'all's input on. Everybody in this room, what do you all think about this? We put in the above grade requirements will not apply if we get a civil engineer. So this is for the event that there's a rock bluff. You have a beautiful road going and then there's a rock bluff, and then you got to get around that somehow, some way. And then you have your lots on some beautiful land up there. So I had a developer that called me and he said, well, Alan, there's going to be cases when I'm developing where I've got some issues on the road construction, but they're only in a little place, but I exceed these. What can I do? And so therefore we brought in the factor of, could a civil engineer design you a road around those rocks that would accommodate the fire vehicle and maybe not as much have to go by the grade requirements? I'm going to start with Jerry. What do you think, brother?
I think you need something like that in there because they are spots like that.
Yeah,
No doubt.
that's what we know mountains.
So when you get that, then that means if it's 25%, as long as he'll sign off on it, you can still.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
If I got that professional certified civil engineer that's done that, that should be his.
Yeah, I think that would be
In the
right.
same way an architect can sign off on stamp a plan, civil engineer would stamp a road. Let me ask the civil engineer, man, what do you think about that as a way around building and mountain roads? If you have a civil engineer design that, as a civil engineer, what do you think about that?
That's a reasonable way to do it. Because there are always unique factors in each of these circumstances, and that's the only case that you're looking at implementing this for.
Yeah, that would be a case where, the roads are having some great issues. Anybody in there? Now, we're going to be revisiting this 40-foot fire truck stuff. So, we take that aside. Having a civil engineer, y'all, do you feel like that's a good addition to the subdivision ordinance?
I think so, but I don't see a problem with having some areas paved because long-term use of a road with a high incline, we see a lot of washout. We see, if someone's not in an all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive vehicle, they completely destroy something even at a much lower grade.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a terrible, I know paving is more expensive or some kind of form to keep all the erosion that's going to happen when you get those high grades and people traveling on those roads.
I think that makes good sense. We know about that in the mountains. If you ain't careful, your roads can wash out your neighbors.
Right.
And so we got to be careful about that. So that sounds reasonable. Everybody got anybody else any input on just civil engineer factor? Okay. Same thing with the curves. Basically, I said the verb above curve requirements. Right now it said all horizontal curves shall have a minimum radius of 45 feet. Vertical curves shall have sufficient transition to accommodate. And I marked out some stuff in there this is per folks' suggestions, a 40-foot long fire response vehicle. The above curve requirements will not apply in the event that the developer plans to submit the developer submits a plan to the review board that is designed to industry standards and stamped by a professional civil engineer currently licensed to practice in North Carolina, and the above plan provides for sufficient access of properly sized fire response vehicles, and we'll get into all that. So that's the same thing on the curvature. If you have a civil engineer saying, I'm trying to get you around a certain part in your road, I'm going to design you a plan right here. I'm going to stamp it. We got you around that. Now you can access it, and it accommodates a fire response vehicle. Now we'll get into what that looks like. All right. You know what? I got more comments from folks on the subdivision ordinance about this gravel than anything else. 6 or 4 inches of gravel. So when I wrote this stuff in here, I write what the people said, because I said, I'm taking notes. I'm doing that. So one of the things up on there is, do you do 6 or do you do 4 inches of gravel? I'd like to hear some perspective on that.
Let me ask Jerry a question.
All right.
Brand new road. You put 4 inches of gravel on it. How long is it gonna last?
That is true. You cannot do on a brand new road.
Thank you.
It needs some kind of base under it, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
But yeah, you can't do 4 inches on a brand new road.
So if it's an existing road, maybe you can do,
You
but
can
then you're measuring it down to the base, and then it is coming
Yeah,
up to 6.
I'm telling you, that gets into a big deal, that gravel deal, because I did one up in Boone. They come through and they measure it, and they want it plumb out to the shoulder. It was a big deal, very costly. So it's if a road's been built a while, you can get by with a lot less gravel. It's just that's a lot of gravel to put down at one time. I mean, if you're doing miles of gravel 2 lanes
Mhm.
wide,
Yeah.
you're putting a lot of money out there. I'm telling you
I
that.
agree.
And is
But
it
if
on,
you
is
don't
it on
put enough
field?
on it,
Is it
then
on
you can
solid?
let
Right,
it
yeah,
put
right.
more.
Yeah, some places
Stuck in
state
the dirt.
agencies, some places 4, so it's kind of one of them things.
And how long does it have to stay 4 inches, right? So if you're driving over it and you're smushing everything down.
That's true.
See, that's
The
compacted
measuring,
too,
the measuring
compacted 4
takes
inches
place
is
at
a-
different times of year. And if it's after a rain and it's pressing it in the mud, you don't really know on that. So that is true. There's a lot of factors around that.
Well, that comes down to what's the soil underneath.
Yeah,
And the steepness of the road too. If it's steeper, it's gonna move more, so. I hesitate that it can just be a simple number. You know, it's really, leave it a number, but maybe go the same route as you did with the other ones, or a design from a licensed civil engineer.
So question back here for David, our developer. Do y'all, when you do a new development, maybe you're on the front end of it, when you do your gravel, are you doing a little light gravel before you sell it? Or are you gonna go all in on it?
Typically, what we do is always going to be, from a long-term perspective, agreeing 100% here. Just as I said, we don't want to buy lots back. I mean, we're a for-profit company. We don't want to go rebuild roads either. So we always do absolutely 6 minimum or 6+, depending on where we're at. Given soil conditions, things like that. But I think just from a developer's perspective, but also from the county perspective, and decent roads and access for emergency vehicles and things like that. I mean, I would say, I'm all for,
Yes.
a more lenient ordinance, but in common sense, to tell you, 6, I think 6 minimum should be the rule. If you had to have a hard and fast rule, I wouldn't consider going less than that. And most of the time, we're putting lots on the ground. We may have a sale prior to pavement, which is obvious because we like to let it, we're gonna let that thing sit through at least 2 seasons, if not longer, sometimes close to a year before we pave, just so we don't have to go back and repave.
That makes good sense. Yeah, that's good perspective. Sir, how are you today? We're talking about subdivision ordinance proposed changes. We're doing a public workshop here. Thank you for coming. All right, anybody else want to expand on that? I know, in the winter, I can put about 6 inches down and you get to freezing and thawing in our old clay, buddy, that stuff just disappears and mud puddles pop up and everything else. I think gravel is a constant battle.
Most subdivision people put gravel, keep the road up for so long, a year or 2 years after they sell the subdivision.
Mhm.
It's in it, so that makes it or everyone I've ever worked for has.
That makes good
At least a
sense.
year's time after it's sold and done, they still have to keep, before they can turn it over to the landowners, they have to keep it up. And with that amount of time, the road shows the bad spots and what you need to do to it.
That makes good sense. That's, yep. That's really good input. All right, that's given us some perspective on that. We're gonna move on down here. I want to, before I move on down there though, we're getting ready to change gears. I want to stay on the roads just one more little bit. What size fire vehicle do I need on these roads? What size requirements am I to, because one of the main reasons on the subdivision ordinance, probably that it came to be, was public safety, and we got to get a fire truck up these roads. And so I need to know y'all's opinion.
I'm gonna go to every fire department, get the wheelbase of every
Okay,
truck they go.
all right. You get that information back to me, get some wheelbases. Eric, what do you think from the fire perspective?
You know, I think the wheelbases are gonna allow you to look at turning radiuses without a doubt. Now, with fire apparatus, there is no standard. You can't say this truck is this length, this truck is gonna be that length. It depends on how they're spec'd, what equipment they put on them. And all that's dictated by a lot of different agencies out there. As far as the actual length of the truck, it comes back to the turning radius, and do you have enough room for that tailboard overhang? Is it a custom cab? Is it a conventional cab? So there's a lot of variations in there when you start looking at that. So just because the wheelbase looks good, doesn't mean that we've got enough room to back and clear the tailboard, slopes, all that good stuff.
Mhm.
So it's, and I say that to say there's no good answer there. There's no standard on fire apparatus. That's why I guess I struggle with that 40 foot and
Mhm.
I'm not, I get there's big trucks out there. And sometimes you have a big truck for multiple reasons. Sometimes you have a small truck for multiple reasons. But that's why I go back to the 40 foot. Where does that 40 foot come from? Where did that come from?
So when I originally talked to that, I was talking to Ashley Bean, and Ashley said, I said, what's your biggest truck in your fleet end to end? And he said something like 42, 44 feet.
Yeah.
So I wrote in a little bit smaller on that to 40, just because that's an even number. But with that said, I'm a layman. I don't know what that looks like on the road. I don't have a clue, how that would turn radius would go. So
I will say that looking at the total length of 40 foot, in my opinion, just looking at fire trucks from all over the place, if you base this, and Tommy chime in, if you base it on 40 foot length of truck, I think that's gonna cover
Just about
95% of everything out there. It'll actually cover most of the ladder trucks, I think, without, again, when you get that.
and that's end to end. That's not wheelbase, right?
Yeah,
That's end to end.
because I don't think we gained 40 foot. wheel.
Yeah, but if you had something like
That's right.
that, you see, you tell what I don't have a clue.
So I mean, with that 40 foot number, and again, looking at the history where it comes from, I think the design, and again, I'm saying that based on, let's get the data and see
Mhm.
what's
The
actually out
wheelbase
there.
and the length
And the length of
combined
the truck.
to see.
Oh,
what-
that's a good
Yeah.
factor on
combine
that.
together.
Yeah.
Exactly, because all that determines what that turning rate, turning radius in a flat parking lot's great. Turning radius with a bank on one side of it
The
is
different
completely different.
Are there, in your experience in Mitchell County, are there neighborhoods where you're like, oh, there's a fire, say on Shootout, or there's a fire up here? Do you you're like, nope, we can't take that truck, gotta have that truck, like,
Yes.
so
Different
you
places.
already know, because we haven't had any of these ordinances, so we definitely have some crazy neighborhoods already.
Mhm.
So I can tell you, and this has been It's funny you mentioned shootout, because I'm pretty sure that's where we did this.
Oh, I had a client go off in the river, so I'm.
This was back. This was probably 04, 05, somewhere in that neighborhood. Not long after shootout was built and got populated. I'm pretty sure it was shootout. Shootout's the one on the left.
On Beans Creek, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So we actually took. Because at the time, we were having this exact same discussion in Mitchell County 25 years ago. And we actually took an engine all the way around Shootout Mountain, a full-size cab over engine.
How'd that make you
Custom.
feel?
Your best driver, I hope.
Yeah, you'd had to have a good driver on that.
Guess it was the worst.
Oh, yeah, okay, no wonder.
So we made it through.
Yeah.
But yes, that is always a discussion. And I will add to that, there is places in the state that inadequate roads affect insurance coverage. If a department says, hey, we can't take our truck across this bridge, or we can't take our truck here because the road's too small. There has been instances in the state that the insurance ISO has come back and cut that out and say there's no fire protection here because they decided, hey, we're not going to update this bridge, we're not going to update this road, and the fire department says they can't get there. And now their insurance company or insurance premium for fire protection and homeowners insurance goes out the roof because they're not in a protected district. So,
But even in Beans or Shootout Mountain, you were able to get your biggest truck there, and it is definitely, I mean, it's just a little 1-lane road, you know, with the real steep creek over here, and
and here's what I want to put in everybody's head from the fire service. You know, it's not getting one truck there.
you got 10 coming.
It's getting multiple trucks there to get the water and the manpower and all that. So one truck is one thing, but that one truck has got to have more to make the system work. So that.
And then you factor in the driving skills of someone that's trying to get there fast. They're hearing a call, somebody might be trapped or something, and then you've got the little edges and stuff that makes it a little bit more difficult. So I could see that. That's giving us some good, I think we got some data now to work with. I think what I hear right here is that we're gonna look at wheelbase and length combined. Gonna look for just a little bit more data on that and try to get that really spec'd out to what we can work with to get a fire truck up there. And sounds good. Yes, sir.
There are federal and state standards for what different vehicles there are, what classes. A WB 40 is a standard truck that has a 40-inch wheelbase. So in doing this, I wouldn't necessarily, I'd suggest you don't take a look at defining the size, but defining the vehicle, the standard vehicle template that we're talking about. So if it's, there is a class, fire trucks come in different classes. But define it that way because that is a standard. And that's what a civil engineer and designing anything is going to have to follow. Turning templates are all related to the standard vehicles. It's not a unique vehicle. I'd recommend not putting in here a unique vehicle based on the size of the fire trucks you have here.
They go in the class.
Yeah.
It doesn't care if it's a fire
Whatever the
truck or
closest
delivery
is.
truck.
Correct.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, agree with that. Question, I guess, are we getting away from roads?
No, we're wherever y'all want to go, because once we get off roads, we're going to lot size and we're on the end of roads.
So was there, so I can catch up a little bit, any discussion about the current fire code and building code in these measurements when y'all did this? As far as, I know in section 5, I think, of the fire code, and then appendix D, which we've never adopted in the county, spells a lot of this out already. And I,
Section 5, you good bit.
okay, so
Road widths and heights.
Yeah.
Yes.
So section 5 identifies that in the fire code, which is already in place because that is state law for the most part. And if this matches that, we're trucking, I think.
It's word for word matching.
Yeah,
Same
so-
dimension.
I think you've also got Appendix D in the fire code, which specifies different developments, road widths, turnarounds, all that, which we've never adopted in this county. And I understand, and this is that in the fire prevention school, it was brought up a couple of weeks ago that Appendix D may be coming out of being an appendix and going in the fire code in 2025 in the next revision. So I think that may be worth looking at to see what the plan for Appendix D is, because that's no longer county ordinance numbers. That's state law in the code numbers then, if that comes to fruition. And I know there's always a lot of talk about adding codes and standards, and then the right people fight about it and it gets taken out. But I think that is one of the discussions right now is Appendix D going into the new fire code revision in 25.
Yeah,
Believe it or not, 25. Six.
No. The new one comes out.
24. Next
year.
First,
Yeah.
2024. Fire, well, everything.
Yeah,
No, not a lick.
yeah,
But
anyway,
it's
this,
its own little animal. The other four trades will all be new code books, January 1, 2020. I'm saying, for North Carolina, it'll be January 1, 2020.
25, so it will go into 25.
January 1, 2020.
So I think, that may be some discussion that changes could be coming down the pipe.
And I'll bring you a copy of Appendix D.
Yes, sir. As I'd written a note down there, I was like, thank you.
And you'll just have to remember that's off the 18. No,
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and that could change those.
the
numbers
stuff
could
in it could
change.
very well change. But it's nothing unusual for appendix.
To-
in one
to
code
become a
cycle, the
statute.
next code cycle to be put in the book and no longer be in.
And then if it comes into state fire code, we're required to follow it regardless of the subdivision. It comes into so that's something folks need to understand. You might say, well, county's putting a subdivision ordinance in place, but a lot of it is mirror and fire code. And I kind of read that in the front end of this, whereas the whereases as to where this is we are mirroring a lot of fire code.
Remember this, since this is public,
Mhm.
and Eric will back me up, the fire code is for commercial, it's not for 1 and 2 family dwellings.
Okay,
That's individual 1 and 2 family dwelling.
okay,
It will pertain to a subdivision, the whole subdivision,
okay,
but
Not the dwelling itself.
individuals themselves on their own property, the fire code will not apply to.
gotcha.
So your subdivision roads,
We'll have to go under
apply.
state fire code should that come through.
driveways and stuff to individual houses will not.
Okay, that's a good clarification and a good thing for the public to hear when they look at this on
And
YouTube.
individuals that are not in a subdivision, this fire code does not apply to. 1 and 2
Gotcha.
family dwellings, it does not apply. Yep.
That is good expertise. Thank you. That's good to put on the record. All right, I'm moving on to lot size. Anybody, let me get one from David back here. No, sir. Glad to have you here.
H on standards for cul-de-sacs.
Mhm.
This may just be written, maybe written incorrectly, but it says a bulb design cul-de-sac shall have a minimum radius of 100 feet of gravel surface.
That was probably not supposed to be a radius, it was probably.
Diameter. Yeah, so I was going to say, I mean, that'd be 2/3 football. field.
Yeah.
Let me correct that.
was Probably,
Thank you.
The minimum excuse me, minimum radius of 50 feet
yes, that,
for 100-foot diameter.
I'm sure you are correct there, that's a.
Y'all note that, so I can have that changed.
You'd have plenty of room to turn.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be a lot of, you can get the 50-foot fire truck in there. Then.
I've read this.
Yeah, that's that right there. You can bring in the live band, the subdivision open house.
When you see the T dimensions there.
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, so that was pertaining to Article 7, Section 3H, just for anybody that's wanting to refer to that on the subdivision ordinance. Okay, so we're moving on through here, and on pages 10, we don't show anything that where anybody gave input. And then we have we go to page 11, which is Article 11, subdivision minimum lot size. Some folks ask about minimum lot sizes. So on section 2, they wanted the minimum lot size to go from 1 acre to 3/4 of an acre for lots not having municipal or approved community sewage disposal systems available to the lot at the time the subdivision plat is submitted to the review board for approval are established as follows. So they're saying if the following establishes, following exceptions right here are points are met, then the 3/4 should be allowed. So that's something that y'all need to chime in. So as this subdivision ordinance reads right now, if you do not have town water, town sewer, and you're doing a traditional septic field and maybe a well with the field around that required, the minimum lot size is 1 acre. Now, if you're on, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're on town water and town sewer, the subdivision ordinance reads that it's a 1/2 acre you can go to then. So I got nods right there. Talk to me, Mason, as environmental health background, and you were looking at a 1 acre lot and maybe there's neighbors and you have septic fields. For around a septic field, typically how much area around a septic field are you all typically given for a single family home? One that might be in a subdivision?
How much land we need?
How much would you need for your septic field and your well field?
Depends. It
Okay.
depends on our setbacks with the state.
Okay,
It depends on what's on the lot and what's adjacent to the lot. If we've got water like creek or stream.
okay, yep,
If we've got a spring, if somebody's a neighbor that's got a spring, gets their water from that. Or if we've got a community well, we've got different setbacks according to what we have.
okay.
So kind of hard to say.
Okay, let's say in a scenario where there was no springs, there was no water, it's just a 1 acre piece of property and it perked. And you have a septic field on there that's covering a 5-bedroom house and a well to supply that 5-bedroom house. Would that be 3/4 versus 1 acre? What would that make any difference on a situation like that?
It'd certainly be easier to get
On
it
the 1 acre? Okay.
than it would 3/4 of an acre.
You'd be, and then one of the questions on that 3/4 versus 1 acre is if your neighbor decides and they haven't developed that property and they come in and you've already put a septic maybe field right up near your border above them and you got a well right there near them, are you limiting them from what they can use on their land?
Could be.
Could be, it's possible, the potential there. That was one of the reason, and I think I heard for the 1 acre.
Yeah, I mean, just because it says 3/4 of an acre or 1 acre, that doesn't mean the entire acre or the entire 3/4 of an acre is usable. Right? Because you have setbacks that may
Mhm.
impact it, but
Okay. 3/4 versus 1 acre. Anybody in here want to chime in? This, your opinions. I want to hear it, man. I think everybody likes to hear.
I like
perspective.
1 acre. And then if it can be proven that it will perk and you can get the separation, then a variance be given for the smaller lot. I think the standard still should be 1 acre and then be able to come off of it. If it's proven that you can get what you need on.
I think that's reasonable.
I think
Would
that's
that,
very.
would that, would that minimum size, would you say that minimum size would go to 3/4?
In flat ground, it would.
Possible, very, very possible, you know, but
Yeah. I mean, I
This
guess my
be a
question,
very-
should it be smaller than 3/4?
It is very, very difficult to get septic repair area on a perfect half-acre lot. It's almost impossible to do, is it not? It can be done, but everything has to be perfect.
And I guess that's my.
And we don't have perfect
And flat,
property.
right?
Flat. There you go.
Yeah. and
That's
I
what I was
guess my
thinking.
Question, should it be limited to 3/4, or if they can prove they can do it on a half acre, should it be allowed? That's my, I don't know if it makes any difference, but. How far down would you take that?
Very,
Me personally, I'd like to leave it at 1.
Right.
And if they can show that they can do it on a half, if you're a developer and you get somebody in there and they say, yes, we can get everything we need on this half-acre lot, on a half acre, and the one right beside it, then your half acre would be a variance.
And it's approved by health department, everybody.
But I
so you
would
get a
think-
check off. So for that variance to go through,
They did.
That's true too.
They had small lots, but the septic had an easement to put septic on another piece of land below them or whatever. So the thing that cuts your.
now there's another
that
thought.
cuts Your lot size way down.
And
You
that-
do that.
And
Go a half acre when you get.
Yeah, and that's what
And like I
that,
said,
Variance.
you know, leave it at an acre, but give ways that it can be lowered if
Right.
there's ways around.
And so if you said in Jerry's case, if they had water and sewer being supplied to it, wouldn't that go off the half acre? Because you could show that you had the supply of a water system and the supply of a sewer system.
Yes,
So then you could go possibly to a half acre in that situation.
Around the river, around something like that, everybody wants to get them as small as they can get them. Get as
Mhm.
many lots in.
that's what I'm saying.
In others.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very.
Okay,
Give, you know, my opinion is leave it at 1, but give ways that it can be taken down.
so a question I got, and I didn't put it in here, what if you were doing like a RV park and you was making small RV spots? You wouldn't lot them, but you might put them on one big piece of property. All that would not fall under the subdivision ordinance, would it?
No.
Because they're not dividing land. You're putting a bunch of RVs on property, but you're not dividing land.
Multiple ones going into one septic system.
Right.
Okay, that was a question I got if they watched the live stream. Anybody out here got to chime in on that? Tell us your name and
Jack Wood, you never talked about it, but could somebody do a subdivision and put a central water system in that everybody in the subdivision uses? The other thing I want to mention, and I've seen this problem, actually seen it, where somebody puts a subdivision in, but then they don't think about the electric. They never cross their brain. So they sell the lots off. But then for French Broad to put the electric, it may have to go across another lot to get it. And that person that owns that lot says, nope, I'm not going to grant French Broad a right of way across my land to bring electric to this other person. So then the other person, even though he can get water and sewer, he can't get the electric. So are you going to factor in that the developer of the property has to put the electric way in such a way that everybody that buys one of those lots does not have to go through another person's lot to get electric to their lot? So those are the two parts.
I think I see some folks looking because I believe that's addressed in here.
That is
Tommy?
addressed in Article 9.
Um,
All of that.
right of ways within subdivisions. Right of ways.
It's all addressed in there. and
Yep,
it's-
it does cover that. Yep, so the subdivision would assure power easements. That would be listed on there.
You're gonna get ready-
Utilities in general.
Utility, yeah.
Covers.
Central water
We
system,
actually did talk about that before you
Yeah.
got here, yeah. And
covered that.
It could be allowed.
Within-
Depending, it could be allowed.
Within health department, so Mason Gardner's with the health department. And so that would be going under the health department's legal restrictions they deal with.
Depending on size and if it goes to the community, you fall under the state's purview, James Henry. That's what I was gonna talk about. But depending, it would go under state purview. But yes, it's theoretical.
All righty, well, we're moving on along and I know we got, I told everybody this is a 4 to 6 deal, so we got about 30 minutes to cover a few more changes. All right, lot size, that's Article 11, Section 3B. For any lot designated for multifamily housing units such as condominiums, the minimum lot size excluding of right of ways for subdivision roads shall not exceed 43 units per acre maximum. Lots must be large enough to allow at least 1.75 parking spaces per unit. If the multifamily housing units are not on municipal sewer, then the multifamily housing must maintain a 1 unit per 0.75 acre ratio. Anybody want to chime in on that? I think that was some legal wording that was added by, Mr. Eggers. I think he put that in there because he marked out, the 10,000 square foot number and made it more of a ratio. So if anybody, and that's one, we're still a pretty good way on the revision. If you look back at that and there's some heartburn about that, call me and I'll talk to our county attorney on that. All right, we have minimum setbacks. Minimum setbacks are as follows. So there was the suggestion to do a single family minimum of side yard 5, front yard setback 20 foot, rear yard setback 5 foot. And then they had the multifamily minimum, side yard setback 10 foot, front yard setback 10 foot, rear yard setback 10 foot. So we've talked to our attorney on that a little bit. And he said, what if they have a single family and they start out and then they move into a multifamily down the road? They make it a multifamily, then your setbacks are out of whack. His suggestion was going with the original wording. Minimum setbacks are front 20 foot, side 10 foot, and rear 10 foot. I want to know what a developer thinks first on that. If you got any opinion on setbacks whenever you're talking with your building areas.
Sure, I mean, I think those are generous, more than generous.
Okay.
We're typically dealing with 30 to 40 foot fronts,
Okay.
depending on right of way as well, that might factor in. 15 foot sides, 15, 20 foot rears, so.
Okay.
I mean,
So the original
Looks great.
wording on that up there of that's kind of what our attorney said, but then is either one, do you like the red paint? Is that?
oh,
what
I
you
mean, again, I have to put the developer hat on and say whatever's least restrictive.
Right.
I mean, in all honesty,
want?
but when we do them, I mean, we've never had a problem with more restrictive setbacks than this is what I'll say.
Okay.
We've never had a problem maintaining these.
Okay, that's,
I mean,
that's
so
good. That's,
these are very generous. I mean, 5 foot is, 10 foot is pretty minor, but
okay.
I think the smallest we go with on sides and rear is probably 15.
Okay.
That's just us, but
That's,
that's numerous, that's 5, 6, 7 states.
Okay. that's good information to have. Okay, anybody up here? Let's talk about setbacks.
Here's the reason
Okay,
for what they are
all right,
originally in
okay,
your 20-foot front
okay,
takes care of your utility right away, automatic. Your 10-foot side and rear. There is a far separation between single-family residences required and commercial, which subdivision is a commercial property with your 10-foot setback off of the property line. Neither party on either side of the property line ever will have to worry about fire rating and adjoining wall. If you go to 5, there is some possibility that the second person to build 5 foot off the lines gonna have to fire rate the adjoining wall and fire rate windows. And if you've ever paid for a fire rated window, you don't wanna do it. That
That's-
is the reason for 10.
why we have a panel here and why we do a public workshop is so we can hear the mindset behind some of this stuff. And some of it's a mindset to save some money. And I think that's
And that is
valid, very valid.
Treating both lots
Yep.
fairly. Nobody's gonna have to do more than
Okay,
So we think what you had there was where we should be.
that's
20 and 10.
my
2010,
profession. While ago, it was
10.
just my opinion. This is my professional.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
it.
a good differentiation.
Well, and it makes
All
sense
right.
when you're building. I mean, that's expensive to try to make
Rate
that, yeah,
Construction ups cost tremendous.
tremendously.
Yeah, that's something
And this
that,
takes all.
so that
question-
feeds more development in our county. You know, if you say I'm saving you money, that's making it better. Anybody else want to give me some feedback on setbacks?
Maybe if you're at that 1 acre lot, then this is making it even better. Another reason why you want that.
True,
You need all that.
Very
square
true.
footage.
very
In
true.
reality, 1 acre lot's 100 by 520 feet.
It's 43,560 square foot.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I rounded it
That's my thought.
and therefore 10-foot side yards, lives here 90-foot, for the house, and frankly, I think that's
And like I said, the
very
20
reasonable for
foot,
a 1 acre lot.
front leaves the utility right away.
All right,
There's no structure going in there right.
that's true.
Setbacks are more correlate with zoning also, and this is
Yep.
not a zoning ordinance.
That's right.
It's a subdivision.
Gotcha. That,
It's down to density and how you want things to look, which is zoning.
that's good perspective. Thank you. All right, we're gonna move on. We are getting a little bit more here with some just legal housekeeping here on Article 12, Section 3, Agency Recommendations. The following agencies shall be given an opportunity to make recommendations concerning an individual subdivision plat before the plat is approved. The district highway engineer as to proposed state streets, state highways, and related drainage systems. The county health director or local public utility as appropriate as to proposed water and sewage systems. The floodplain administrator as to areas where floodplain requirements are applicable. And a lot of these are checkpoints you're going to be doing anyway if you're building something. But it's, in many ways, this is a roadmap for somebody to come in and check box their development to make sure they're covering everything as much as it is a document to protect, to grow wisely. So there's some things in there. And once again, while I'm changing pages, anybody want to add something to that or comment on that, feel free to do so. We could add fire to that. Let's do that. Add statement on fire agency related, add a D section related to fire.
The only thing that I would add, if county health director, I would just say it wouldn't guarantee septic or, well, it's just looking at it to meet
Okay,
the ordinance, right?
yeah.
We always get leery when we have to sign something or,
Mhm.
right? So I might put some. verbiage.
So in the event, the county, in the event,
That's gonna be the same.
the
thing.
county health director,
If DOT has an issue. Fire has an issue, the health department has an issue. I think that goes with, I just see this as a requirement to get reviews by those agencies before the subdivision is pursued.
that makes sense.
It's no commitment from any of them.
Would this change as far as final plat recording, would this change certificate of approvals? Required on, I mean, I know I saw some earlier, which were the base normal certificate of approvals, but wasn't sure if this would be added certificate of approval for review.
I think we might need some wording at the beginning of that section stating kind of what Mason was saying, that this is outside, but they have the jurisdiction. If there is a concern, these folks can add in. So I might put something to the following shall be given an opportunity should there be a legal issue, and I'll get the lawyer to write it up, a legal issue or something like that nature, maybe to where that's where these folks come in. And I think that's kind of what it is, like with the floodplain administrator. if you're building on the floodplain, you've got to have a floodplain permit. Well, if there is a plat that does not have a floodplain permit with it, then that plat really couldn't be approved for the subdivision because that's going to block the whole process. So that's where that would maybe come in that perspective. But on some of these other ones, they're already in the health director's already in the mix on that. There's a chance I'd take that part out completely anyway.
I was kind of thinking the same, maybe what you're saying. I'm looking at those three. As far as the water, sewer, that is legally there already.
Mhm.
Yes, they're gonna have to have it.
As far as floodplain, it is legally there already.
Mhm.
The district highway engineer, streets, highways, drainage systems, they don't have any jurisdiction on that subdivision, only the access to
Yep,
their streets and
that's true.
highways. So I don't know, and I guess I'm just throwing that out as for conversation.
Well, let's talk about whether that section needs to be there or not. I'm gonna put a big question
I
mark
think
on
it's
there.
good. I just don't know that it's worded. It
Yeah.
could be worded a little.
Because that's one
differently.
I added, not the attorney, and I've drafted it off of the state subdivision ordinance, but I added the floodplain administrator part to it. But it may not need to be drafted into ours because we kind of got that covered by the wording we already have. So it could be that's a question. I'll ask our attorney if I can take that out.
In the case of Mitchell County, it's getting a far review on it anyway.
Exactly,
Because
yeah.
I'm the far guy too.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I
There
may
you
be
go.
getting Too down in the weeds with that, but
I mean, that's in the
I don't know
case
if
of
you
Mitchell
want to
County.
write something that's already being done.
I agree. I don't like redundancy. If we can take stuff out of there and simplify the document, I'm good with that totally.
Yeah, but I can see where you might want the state, the DOT look at it, because they may want to take it over, right? And it meets their.
Well, now sometimes in a subdivision road, a DOT, if they make it to their requirements, that's
And
true.
And that's a good selling point.
Maybe leave one and that'd be A.
I don't know.
And yeah, now, yeah, okay, the last point,
They're petitioning
yeah,
to
yeah,
take over, right?
They may want to.
yeah, so
They may be petitioned to take it.
there might be a petition to take that over, yeah. All right, we're starting to roll down here. Let's see, subdivision plats, this is Article 13. Section 2, letter I. The final plat shall be 18 inches by 24 inches for recording with Mitchell County Register of Deeds and shall be at a scale of not less than 1 inch equals 200 feet. The final subdivision plat must show minimum and maximum elevations on each lot. So that was the addition to that. So the reason they wanted elevations on the lots was that the slope of the hill sometimes indicates the size of the lot. Is that correct, Keegan? So that was kind of why we needed the elevations on that subdivision plot or plat there. So anybody got, that's kind of something that's easy to do. A lot of times your surveyors will put that in there for you, or there's topographic material. You can get that. That's not a hard thing to do. Just a little thing there to keep us to where, we're good. About to finish up here. Mitchell County Board of Commissioners shall appoint a technical review committee. It was 5. It was asked to bring it up to 9 persons. And this was the suggestions made. The reason behind that was they wanted 9 folks. So it would not have this feeling of just a few people with a lot of power to control your subdivision. Now, there's some good points to that and some bad points to that. I'm going to talk a little bit about, first off, the composition of the board. 1 employee of Mitchell County Inspections, 1 employee of the Toe River Health District or the Mitchell County Health Department employed in the design and approval of private sewage disposal systems, septic tanks, and wells. 1 person named by the Mitchell County Fire Association. They marked me out, the Mitchell County manager. They said they didn't want him there, so I'm good with that. 2 members of the Mitchell County Board of Commissioners. 1 licensed real estate professional or real estate attorney. 1 North Carolina licensed surveyor, 1 professional excavation contractor or NC licensed civil engineer, and 1 NC licensed building contractor. So what we wanted to do is the point behind that was not to make this technical review committee some governmental organizations. It would have some folks that were actually, out in the fields working. So you'd have a contractor, you might have a grade work contractor, you might have a surveyor. Now, that's all fine, but now that's 9 folks. Can you get all 9 of them to a meeting? And how will that go in practice? Now, you can Zoom them in on computer nowadays and stuff. And maybe you'll just need a quorum out of that. So out of 9, what you'd have to have 5 to meet and do stuff with. But at least if I put myself, anytime you do this, you put it yourself in your position. If I was a developer and I was doing a subdivision, who in the future, who do you want making all the decisions? Do you want, just a small group, or would you want a bigger group? And that's why we moved that to 9 people. Anybody got comments on that from this panel as to whether or not large board, small board, who should be on the board? Kind of all that.
Are they volunteering to be on board?
Yeah, we
I know they're
volunteer.
appointed by the commission.
They're appointed by the commissioners, but they're voluntarily on the board. And that's another one. How often does the board meet? You're volunteering. Do you, and then there's variances. A developer might need something because he's got to move. He's got stuff going on. Would it be a quarterly meeting? If so, then if somebody's got 2 months, 2.5 months before a meeting, that's a long time.
Question for Keenan. How many subdivision plats do you get in a year?
Very few currently.
Okay.
May change, may not.
It might change.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot more involved in
Yeah.
it, and questions asked, a lot. Just
I'll just say again, developer perspective. We live and work, at least in this area, we're on a very limited schedule in a year. We don't have 12 months to do things. As far as on the ground, getting infrastructure in, building roads, land sales, different things like that. So, we're usually looking at a 6 to 8 month window max. So if you push meetings, and that probably would very easily accommodate now, but I'm thinking about the future. If you push meetings to quarterly or something like that, that's going, especially if something did not get approved. You could be looking at, months and months just to get an approval, which would probably kill that year's putting something on the ground. So it could be it could just be prohibitive rather for a developer rather than, having a monthly. You may not need to have, if there's nothing submitted, you're not gonna have to have a meeting.
I'm all about not having meetings, but if you set it as a monthly meeting as needed.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be good.
First Wednesday of every month, you got a meeting.
And
If there's nothing to
Wednesday
meet about,
morning,
you don't meet.
bright and early before your day gets started.
This review board, technical review board is doing nothing as long as the submittals are packed.
Yeah. And think about this
Correct.
now, the technical review board, they do the variances. So if there's a variance needed, let's say, something's holding up a variance, that is good to have that 1 month, but you can cancel that meeting if you need to. If there's nothing there on the itinerary.
I didn't see that. I was thinking, looking at it almost like the staff review and a planning board review. which
The
is
review
something-
board will
I see what you're saying.
look at them as they come in, and then if we don't pass it, then it goes to the committee.
Okay,
Unless you, as a developer, see what we understand what we failed on it and you change it and resubmit, then it still doesn't go to.
yeah, that's fine. I misunderstood that on the front end. So.
Okay. Yeah, just for everybody, just to bring you up to par, the review board is 2 people at the beginning. Developer submits a plat, the review board sees all the boxes are checked, everything's right. They might make a suggestion about something here just to tweak something, but the suggestion's made, it's tweaked and it's passed. So that's letting that move forward. Now we're getting into the build process. Something comes up and a variance is needed. Now the technical review committee comes in and that's where they would come in to grant the variance.
This is already defined pretty clearly in meetings. Technical review committee shall meet upon the call of a meeting by the chairman or a majority of the members and shall meet as necessary to act upon appeals and requests for variance.
That works then. If we just got a few developments going and that developer needs a meeting, then boom, we call it. Okay, that'll work. That makes sense. All right, we're gonna move on through here. Anything else on that? I think we're about, let me look at my time. I'm 5:48. We on schedule. The quorum is 5. Okay, that was pretty much already covered. The appointment and term, we said 3 years. So if I put Jerry on that technical review committee, which he might say, heck no, but 3 years. But you can step off if something comes up in life, or something like that, or so that's kind of what we'd be doing. And then we talked about road variances again. And there was road variance discussion about whether I would make that a variance for curvature and grade. But I don't think that's going to go to a variance. I think that's just going to be written in to part of the roads, is the civil engineer option will just be a part of that. It won't be a variance. So you won't be going to get a civil engineer. It's just, if you got a road and you're building it, you come up on a place where it's rocky and you need a redesign on that road, that civil engineer will get in there and work on that. So that part of that may be different on there. Okay, attorney added this part on section 3, article 15, I think it is right here. Section 3, article 15. The developer deposits with Mitchell County certified funds in an amount equal to 125% of the cost estimate to be released only as the work is performed. Our attorney added that. Anything else? Is that standard? Y'all pretty much getting some head nods. That's a standard deal with subdivisions. Okay, we're gonna move on to the final thing here is article 17, subdivision completion. So it was asked that we have some wording to say what quantifies a subdivision completion, so we can kind of have an end point with this ordinance. So section 1, final plat approval. Following the preliminary plat approval and the completion of any infrastructure required under this ordinance of the posting of the appropriate bond in lieu of final construction, any individual may apply for final plat approval, which under approval shall be recorded with the Mitchell County Register of Deeds. That's final plat approval is one thing. Continuing obligations, section 2, final plat approval. Following final plat approval, the owners of the parcel shall have an affirmative and continuing duty to maintain any infrastructure not dedicated to and accepted by a governmental institution. All such infrastructure shall be maintained in such a manner as to allow proper and appropriate access by emergency vehicle access consistent with this ordinance. Those two things were added by our attorney. Basically just kind of summation on that. So I appreciate y'all's time. I appreciate you taking time. Now, there might not have been very many people, but I bet when this goes on YouTube and it is viewed, a lot of people are going to be looking at that to say, let me dive into this. So I invite you to tell your neighbors that if they're concerned about subdivision ordinance and, this public workshop, feel free to look it up on YouTube and view that. And, we haven't made any final decisions on this. The commission board is going to review this. Some of these things they will change probably after hearing what the panel's recommendations are. Some of these things they'll keep. So, when we get the revised subdivision ordinance, I will put that out on the Mitchell County webpage and the Mitchell County Facebook page and set a date for a subdivision public hearing. There's general statute at play when we do that. So I think we have to advertise for that subdivision public hearing for approximately 2 weeks prior to the public hearing. Then we'll have the public hearing. And then the next meeting after we have the public hearing, if there is no major objections or changes that we see fit to make, then that revised subdivision ordinance will then become the new standard subdivision ordinance. And I figure the time frame on that would be looking at about 6 to 8 weeks is my guess, because it'll take me a little while to run this through legal and get them to write up everything. It'll take a little while for the commission board to look at this and see what they want to keep and what they like about the changes and what they don't like, or in the areas where a decision's made, they'll probably view this video and make a decision. Also wanting to get a little more information on our fire vehicles as to how to quantify that. So I will have that. And then the next step is a public hearing, and I invite everybody to be there. So before we close, anybody have anything they want to say about subdivisions or anything? All right, I'm keeping us on for 6 o'clock. Thank you for your time. This will be available on YouTube, and appreciate the panel. Appreciate our folks here too. That was some great input. Appreciate everybody. Thank you.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Nice to meet you, John. Good to see you. I know I've seen you before on different job sites, different properties.
I've got an easy forgettable face.
I don't know how to turn it off.
How's it going, Mason?
How are you doing?
Did you make it up to that when that fire, When I found out the water, you'll know it when you might be the first second.
Went for the candy before me.
This will probably be my dinner. Get it while I can.
Yeah.
I don't think it's- I hope it's not one I get to an intern. Thank God.
I hope you guys do. It was the band. You know, I honestly, I say we agree with.
Are you getting rid of it? I was gonna say, because nobody.
I don't know if it's still on video.
Yeah.